Welcome to another edition of What Barrie's Talking About from Barrie 360. I'm Dan Blakely. On this week's program, Winter is Nigh, we get a preview from climatologist David Phillips and his prediction for a white Christmas. Barrie Mayor Alex Nuttall explains the province's plan to help cities deal with homeless encampments, and the Barrie Colts had a rare winless weekend. We get the conversation started after this. Premier Ford invited a collection of mayors to Queen's Park last week to outline the plan that will allow municipalities to address the issue of homeless encampments. Barrie Mayor Alex Nuttall joined the Premier then and joins our Ian MacLennan now to explain the plan moving forward.
Welcome, Mayor Nuttall. Let's talk about Bill 242, the Safer Municipalities Act, dealing with homeless encampments. You were down at a news conference with about a dozen or so other mayors, your colleagues, and the Premier. Some background to the bill that was introduced and where you hope this takes everybody.
Yeah, well, what the provincial government did was really try to encapsulate what we'd been requesting as mayors for the province to do. We need to have a more detailed plan on how we deal with encampments, on how we overcome some of the court cases that have resulted in making it really difficult, if not impossible in some cases, to remove encampments and individuals who are, putting tents in parks and living there. And really trying to restore that safety inside of our public spaces, our downtowns, our parks, so that we're able to use these spaces for what they're meant for. Like, parks are meant for kids. Downtown for the city of Barrie is a place of commerce. It's a place of community. It's a place where people get to meet. And what we were facing too often was and is drug overdoses or other behaviors that we don't want to see in our public spaces. And you'll also notice that one of the things inside of the bill is to give the police officers the ability to arrest or confiscate narcotics and illegal drugs that are not that shouldn't be consumed in public.
But in terms of illegal drug use in public spaces, those that fail to comply, they could be jailed for a period of time, $10,000 fine. And critics have said, well, if you're homeless, it's not likely you have $10,000. So is this a hard-edged sword, or is there a subtle approach here? Because the government did also announce about $75 million plus in new funding in terms of shelter spaces, also in terms of adding more money to complete affordable housing projects. So is there trying to find a balance here?
Well, I think your word just said it. I see this as a balanced approach in the sense that you need to both offer the help, right, which is where do I get rehabilitation? Where do I get detox? Where do I go and get those supports that I need that I can't get right now? And at the same time, when you're taking care of that individual, you also need to take care of the public space and say, okay, well, now we're going to enforce our laws because we are investing in the things that people have been asking for. And how many times have I sat on your show here and we've been talking about the need to invest in rehabilitative services, invest in treatment services, so that we're not just leaving individuals on their own anymore. Well, that's happening. We saw that in the heart hubs. We've seen that in the latest piece of legislation. We also need the ability to enforce our laws inside of our parks, inside of our downtown, so that our community feels safe to use these spaces, feels safe in these spaces, and we protect, our most valuable resources, which is our children.
I'm just wondering, in terms of, if we know that the legislation, the House isn't sitting right now with the legislature, so it's going to take some time. What are your expectations at the end of the day? Is there enough shelter space? I know the county oversees that, but can you get a room for everybody, or do you have to use hotels, or what? Outside of the people who don't want to be in a shelter, and there are those that don't want to be, but for people who are mentally ill, maybe they're not addicted to drugs, just mentally ill, is there a compassionate approach to this too, though?
Look, I think that there there has to be, everything we do needs to be done with compassion. That's certainly the approach we've taken with encampments locally in the city of Barrie. When we go in, we don't just go in and say, your tent needs to be removed, have a good day. It's go in with referral services. Let's see, is it a motel? Is it a shelter space? Is it a transitional unit that's come available? Is it a government not-for-profit unit that's available more longer term for you? And what are the treatment and rehabilitative services you need if you need it? If it's just a mental health issue, what type of counseling and support can we give you in your journey on that? If it's a job issue and you need employment, let's get you into to somebody who can give you great advice on employment and get you into the right place. So I think compassion, everything we do needs to lead with compassion. But that compassion, when we're talking about it, needs to be applied equally across society. Yes, the individuals who are inside those parks need to be shown compassion, and that's what we're doing. But we also have to have compassion for the kids who can't walk through the park beside their house right now, who can't go down the slide inside of that park. And so I think that's where the balance comes in when we're looking at this legislation. Quite frankly, people are done, as the Premier said, enough is enough. And what we need to do is make sure that we have those services available. And, we work every single day to get those services in place if they're not there. There have been, when we were in Bursey Park, for instance, there were times where we were asking for folks to take shelter beds, to take motel rooms, to take these units that are available. And the answer was essentially no. There were different reasons that were given why it was no. But it was essentially no. And so what we need to be able to do is those individuals who are just saying, nah, I really don't want to leave, so I'm not going to, they need to be able to be moved on. In Bursey, anyone who wanted a space got a space.
It was available. Okay, so in Section 7 of the Charter, we talked about Waterloo, Kingston, Toronto, where the courts ruled that I think the key was that when there is nowhere else to go, that these encampments are a safe space, at least for those that are living in them. Do you feel the courts have hamstrung the municipalities?
I feel the courts have actually gone into legislating, and that's just my personal feeling. I certainly I'm going to abide by the laws and respect our judicial system, but I think that they've crossed from interpreting laws to creating them, and that's why it was needed for the provincial government to step in and provide a new legislative fabric so that we could actually understand exactly what the law is or isn't due to legislation, not due to decision piecemeal, this court, this place, that place.
Would you support the Charter of Rights being used to go take that step further if the courts are in the way or are not going in the direction that the city would like, as we saw in Toronto, Waterloo, and Kingston? Would you take that step, or would you?
Yeah, I don't think it's really what the city would like, because it's not a municipal decision. This decision is one that needs to be made by the provincial government and the provincial government alone. I've been very clear when it comes to providing the supports and being able to have our parks back for kids, for people to use, that if the notwithstanding clause is required in order to do that, that it should be used, because we can't put one group's interests and charter rights above another. It needs to be an equal across the board interpretation. And when we say that folks can sit in parks and put needles in their arms or smoke crack or meth or whatever it is in the same space that a child's supposed to be jumping on a jungle gym of some kind, we know that the courts are saying, well, it's that individual's right to be able to do those things there. But we also know it's the child or the family's individual right to be in that space using it as well. But they also have the right to bring their children up in an environment that's not full of illegal and illicit drugs. And the last thing, I think we can agree, the last thing we want on our, 5 to or 2 until 12-year-old children's minds that are using these park spaces is the idea that there are drugs out there that you can just go do and see and be part of. We don't want that in their minds. We don't want that in their environment. We need to have these conversations to say they are out there, but we don't want to show them how to do it. And that's what's happening inside some of these parks.
Are there enough shelter beds today I guess we're talking. And
I would have to ask the county of Simcoe, right? Because
I know it's a moving target.
But I think you're hitting on a really good point, which is that we need to constantly be reassessing and auditing. Are there enough shelter beds? Are there enough transitional units? Are there enough subsidized rent geared to income units available out in the public? And the answer sometimes is yes, and sometimes it's no. And so we really need to be right on the good information to make sure when there are available spaces that they're being offered and used by those in encampments. And when there's not, we need to look at what the capacity issue is and how we deal with it. And I can tell you, as I was walking into the studio today, I was on the phone with a couple of folks here, and we're working on trying to find a way to get another 50 beds available. Will it happen? I don't know. It takes a lot of things coming together in order for it to work right. The interesting thing is, as you know, that's not a city responsibility, but we're having to step into this space to make sure that we can abide by the legislation that the province has now tabled, and also make sure that we are keeping our public spaces safe and clean for folks to use.
Now, the City of Barrie is seeking one of the treatment hubs. Is there anything else?
Can I correct you on that?
Yeah.
So the City of Barrie is not seeking
through the county.
It's the county
through
that's
the county.
seeking it.
Yes.
We supported it with a letter, and we organized everyone getting together so that everyone was on the same page. But it is a county-led initiative.
Right. Now, because they oversee the shelter systems, et cetera. What do you want from the province? I mean, do you put the screws to them?
Is this like my letter to Santa? Do I get to
kind of? Well, you sent it earlier to the premier with about 12 other mayors. What else is on that wish list, though? That
like just on this subject matter, right?
Yeah.
I think that in the tabling legislation, much of it has been covered. If there's one thing that I could ask for, it'd be more funding to get there quicker. I think that there's a ton of funding that's being given to the county of Simcoe. There was an 86% increase in homeless prevention funding last year. There's $20-30 million, probably $30 million on the minimum that goes into homeless prevention in Simcoe County. Our audits say that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 people. I mean, you can do the math. There's a ton of dough out there. The question is, how do we get to that point where we have the capacity where it's not a question every day? Are we going to be able to get the person who's in the encampment into a safe environment with a roof, et cetera? And so the faster we can get there, the better. And that obviously requires fuel in the tank and dollars to do it. And
finally, maybe some advocates would ask, but when was the last time you were in an encampment, maybe to talk to some of the people and get on the ground?
Yeah, I think it was actually in the spring. It was either early spring or late fall, but I went through there myself. I went over to George Street, went through, talked to some folks, got to see a little bit about what's going on down there. It was quite interesting, to see how many people, and certainly the culture that's there and life. But, when it comes to, I don't think I have to say this, but unfortunately I do have to say this, when it comes to these parks where we have encampments taking root, the last thing we want to do is send politicians in there. We want to have counselors in there. We want to have referral services in there. We want to have the county of Simcoe in there. But it's not the place for politicians to go insert themselves. Our job is to make sure that all of those resources are available, and then you let the experts in that subject matter go and work with the individuals who are in those places.
Still much to be done, still much to be discussed. We will be keeping watch in the new year. This is What Barrie's Talking About from Barrie 360. I'm Dan Blakely, welcoming back to the studio the master of meteorology, the penultimate prognosticator, the wizard of weather, David Phillips. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm overcome by that introduction. But Dan, always a treat to be with you. I much prefer to be on the shores of Kempenfeld Bay.
Yeah.
But, hey, in this time we're talking about the winter, it's not always a a sure thing we can do there.
One day we'll get down there to talk about
I remember
winter.
a couple times, and certainly where it was almost like springtime in December, and it was just quite balmy, and not this year, but it's not been a bad start to winter.
No,
so far.
not yet. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
I wanted to harken back to fall for a minute because you, as usual, pretty much hit that bang on. We got an extended fall, I think. It didn't leave quickly, and winter didn't come in and give us any hints of what was to come until the last couple of weeks.
Absolutely, Dan. You know, I have to declare this. Fall is my favorite season.
Well, you forecasted well anyway.
But September, October, November, it's free energy time. You don't have your air conditioning on, your heat on, and summer wants to carry on, and winter, if it doesn't get a foothold, well, then you're happy with it. You see, the harvest comes in, and so it just, I remember once saying that it was a great fall, and somebody said, well, it's not great for fishermen. They like it to be cooler because it's good for the fish to bite. Well, okay. There are always somebody who's complaining about the weather, but it was really in Barrie area, across Canada, it was the warmest fall on record. In Ontario, in 77 years, if you ranked all of the falls, again, we're talking about September, October, November, and it was the warmest by far. We had this year the warmest winter, last winter, the warmest fall, not so much in between, but it really has been sort of the end, the beginning and the end were very, very mild. A lot of the lakes were, of course, warm, didn't cool off. And then we saw the result of that when we got into December with the lake effect snow up in our good friends up in Gravenhurst and Bracebridge. They were just in London. They were just pummeled with all this snow. And of course, we in Barrie were looking for it. Where is it coming? And so often the forecast talked about snow squalls, and then you'd wake up and it didn't happen, like you say. It just shows you how uncertain those features are locally. And none of this was from storms that come from Texas or Oklahoma or Colorado. It was all homegrown. It's on our backyard. So Toronto didn't get very much, and in Barrie so far we've had about 50 centimeters of snow, in about 10 days with snow, but it's not stayed. It's been sort of warming temperatures, and coldness has not been as much. So we haven't really had the full kind of feeling and look of kind of what winter could be like in this area. But it just shows you the direction of winds. I just want to speak just briefly about lake effect snow, because in your listening area, you people were buried. They've had too much winter, and yet other people are looking for winter, like you say. Mm-hmm. And in Collingwood, they can't really, it's not cold enough to make the snow. They've been getting some, but you get in between from Gravenhurst to London. These are like 1 meter snowfalls plus 1.5 up in Muskoka area, and it just shows you the fact that what's important in lake effect is not only the open lake, the warm lake, and the cold air. People think, well, that's the fuel. But it's the wind direction. Mm-hmm. If you get the winds sort of varying all over the place, well, a lot of that misery is spread to many areas, and so you don't get these Paul Bunyan snowfalls. But if they get wound up over the full fetch of Lake Huron, for example, and you can make a difference. Lake Huron, for example, you get a small fetch of 50 kilometers or a long one of 370. And so that's picking up all that moisture and then coming aboard and then hitting the land, and boy, it just dumps that load, and you get buried in the snow. So that's why places like the Gravenhurst saw so much snow. It was just like almost all of it in 2 days. It's just really, it's a bit luck. It's hard to forecast that kind of thing because the winds are quite variable. But if you get these streamers all locked in and just, going day after day, and then that's when you get buried in snow. So, fall, I think, was gentle and kind to us. We had moments of it not too far away, but overall, I think we got out of fall with a feeling that, wow, so far so good.
When we talked about the fall, fall and September, you had hinted that this winter is not going to be like last winter. Not as mild, probably more snow, and I think the people in Muskoka are agreeing with you at this point. Some people in Collingwood probably as well. Is the lake effect going to be a factor as we move through the winter?
Well, that's an interesting question because, Dan, the lake effect is always a wild card because, you get a storm coming from Texas that can sometimes put a lot of snow in the province. It doesn't distinguish from one person to another. It just brings you a general 20, 30 centimeters of snow from Windsor to Ottawa. And everybody's digging out and plowing and pushing and shoveling it. And so that's what you get, one of these American storms bumping into some cold Canadian air. But with lake effect, it's very, very, of course, very localized. And the problem with lake effect is it never ends. These storms that come from the United States, they're like a 12-hour wonder. They come 12 hours, they dump the snow, they leave, and then you got 48 hours in cleaning it up until the next one comes. And so they're entities that you can see that have a start and stop. But lake effect it could go on for 2.5 months until that lake freezes over. I mean, that's really what you look at. You look at how warm the water is, how open the lake is, and how cold the air is. And that combination of very cold and very warm makes unstable air and can create, as we saw in places like Owen Sound and Collingwood, we had in some of those thunder snows, we had thunder snow. Actually, you could hear thunder and see lightning in that snow. It shows you how unstable the air is. So until that lakes freeze over, and if it's going to be a warmer winter, well, it's going to take longer for them to freeze over, to say. Last year, I don't think they ever froze over. I mean, we saw the lowest lake effect or ice cover on the Great Lakes ever. And so lake effect was a problem. That's why Barrie ended up in last year with about 80% of our annual snowfall. People thought there wasn't much snow, and certainly when you were in Toronto, they had maybe a 30% of it and 15% in Hamilton. But here we had, because that lake effect was in full flight the whole winter, where typically it's over by the middle of January because the lakes are freezing over, and then it starts like a landmass, and the only snows you're really getting are the ones from Colorado or Texas or Oklahoma, those kinds of systems that everybody gets. So my sense is there is still some worry. Keep an eye on the cold air. If it's the cold air, the open water, then that lake effect snow engine can get turned on very quickly. And again, if those winds stay steady in the same direction, it can bury you in the snow. So I think we still have that risk until we get into mid to late January. Our models for January, February, and March going forward look warmer than normal, not as excruciatingly warm as we had last year, so we're not canceling winter. There'll be moments you wish you were somewhere else, but we really think when we crunch all the numbers at the end, say, and getting into April, around Easter time, we'll say, this winter was kind of kind. It wasn't statistically, it was more of a winter, but wasn't harsh. You can't combine last winter and this winter and get average. No, it fits a pattern that we've seen, which it will be a continuation of winters that are a little less brutal, a little less colder than some of our grandparents and parents lived through. Snowfall, always a tough wild card. I never want even volunteer what we think precipitation would be, because in this part of the world, when you're talking precipitation, you could be talking rain or snow or freezing rain or ice pellets. And that's always the risk. When you have a milder than normal winter, you tend to get both the rain and the snow. So people who are very snow sensitive, they have a difficult time. But then there's also that freezing rain. I mean, the only people who like freezing rain are auto body shop owners for all of the accidents that are going on.
Yeah.
But for hydropower, for people outage, for slipping and sliding, for the broken hips and bones, it is. And that is really what my concern of the future is we get from -8 for an average temperature in winter to -2. You're going to be into that sweet zone of that freezing rain, ice pellets, congealed mixture of all the above. And so that risk of freezing rain looks like more into the cards than it was in the past.
And the million-dollar question, even though it's, the tail end of the 7-day forecast, White Christmas?
Oh, listen, we didn't have one last year.
No.
So, and it used to be almost, I would say, if people said to me, well, what are the chances in Barrie of having a white Christmas? And statistically, it worked out to be about 75%. So 3 out of every 4. But in the last 13 years, we've had, since I've been in Barrie, we've had 4 green and 9 white. But my sense is we've already got about 9 centimeters, 10 centimeters sitting on the ground. We have some cool temperatures coming up for the weekend, but then it's going to turn a little warmer, but still being at freezing mark or below. So my sense is, I think with a few flurries, that threat of lake effect, that we'll have a better chance this year of having a white Christmas.
All right, David, always a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for the insight. Look forward to meeting you on the waterfront in the spring.
I look forward to that. Thank you, Dan, so much.
The Barrie Colts were back in action Wednesday night, blanking Owen Sound 4-0. First career shutout for goalie Ben Hrebeck. It followed a pair of losses last weekend. Barrie 360's Will Conkin takes a look back with Colts writer and broadcaster Gene Pereira.
Gene, the last couple of weeks I've been starting our conversation by saying it was a good weekend for the boys. Well, not so much this time. The Colts have lost 2 in a row. They were close ones, though, and went the distance. They fell to the Brantford Bulldogs 2-1 in overtime, then lost in a shootout to the Ottawa 67s 5-4. Gene, is there cause for concern at all? At least they earned a point in each of these games, but head coach Marty Williamson, he wrapped it up well, called their play sloppy, I think.
Yeah, it hasn't been the best Colts play over the last couple of games. And, talking to Marty Williamson, talking to some of the players, they felt that even though they got a point, they probably weren't deserving of it in either game. The loss to Brantford and the shootout loss to Ottawa on Saturday. And, again, you wonder, obviously, Bo Akey and Cole Bowden going away to national junior team, but we just didn't see the traditional energy. And then once again, one of the big issues with this Barrie Colts team that they've battled all year is the slow starts. And, in both games, Barrie really in Brantford didn't get going until the third period, and the same thing again with Ottawa. And even then, they had a lot of penalty trouble.
Yeah, you were saying that Bo Jelsma, he specifically said about their slow starts.
Yeah, he acknowledged, it's been an issue all season long, and it's kind of one of the strange things about this team is they have fantastic second periods, and the first period isn't really, their period. And, against Ottawa, they started out the first 5 minutes, got off to a good jump, got a goal by Jaden Newton, but after that, it didn't really take them until late in the third to get going, and just not a lot of jump that we've seen in this team, and usually second periods are better, and they weren't, and it kind of carried over. And I think in both games, they certainly didn't look to have the energy or the legs that they normally do.
Someone who did have some energy, though, was goalie Ben Hrebeck. He was impressive in the loss to the Bulldogs. He made 39 saves. Talk about his work in goal.
Yeah, there's no doubt that game, specifically Friday in Brantford, that Hrebeck helped them get that point. He was just outstanding, and some nights you're going to get the team where maybe they're not their best, and a goaltender can make a huge difference. And Hrebeck did exactly that on Friday night in Brantford. He made some huge saves to keep it close and to give his team a chance to get it into overtime. And, the young netminder, you see that confidence grow each start, night in and night out. And while he may not tell you about how good he's been, his teammates and coaches have. And, it's just been a real change. I mean, that was a big question coming into this year, the backup goaltending. And I think Hrebeck has really kind of calmed down that situation and answered a lot of those questions. He's just been outstanding. His numbers show it, and efforts like Friday and Brantford do.
And he'll get more of the reins coming up with Sam Hillbrandt going off to World Juniors for the USA. Is that correct?
Yes, Sam Hillbrandt left Sunday for Plymouth for U.S. camp as they head into the World Junior Championships, and that means Ben Harevic's going to be the guy, and it's different. They're going in with a lot of confidence in their young goaltender, and it's going to be a chance for him to show that he can carry the reins, and he's a guy that hasn't been on the draft radar, and I really wonder with his size and if he continues his strong play, if he's going to start getting noticed. Marty Williamson brought that up and kind of, speaking on behalf of his young goaltender, just how good he's been, and it's an opportunity for Ben to show that he can be the number one guy.
Looking forward, we are recording this early, so the Colts played the Owen Sound Attack Wednesday. They then have a go at the Niagara Ice Dogs Thursday. Gene, the Ice Dogs, they're right there with the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, this is a young team, a ton of talent up front, and again, they're a team that can put the puck in the net, and they went through a little bit of a lull there for a couple of weeks, but they're right back to putting wins together, and they're right on the heels of the Barrie Colts, and it should be an exciting one to close out the pre-Christmas schedule. And I know well over time that a lot of coaches, you get the parents coming out to pick up the players, and they're looking forward to the Christmas break. And that last game before Christmas, you never know what you're going to get. And I figure with this being a big one in the standings, that it should be a great one Thursday at Saddle Arena.
And for us as well, we'll be taking a week break too for Christmas. So happy holidays, Gene.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays to you as well.
And that's our program for this week. Thanks to Ian and Will for their input, to Matt Ladder for his technical touch, and to you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to What Barrie's Talking About, rate it, review it. You can also keep up with What Barrie's Talking About on Blue Sky and X at Barrie360, on our website, Barrie360.com, and there's our daily Kickstart podcast available from any streaming service and on our website. I'm Dan Blakely. Hope you'll join us again next time.